Welcome everyone to our latest edition of PwC's Career Webcast series. Today with the topic on deals and specifically our transaction service practices. Thank you first of all for your interest. My colleague Felix and I will be very happy to lead you through the next half an hour presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in on your screen. I think it should be below where you see my picture right now. And we will take 50 minutes at the end of our presentation to answer all the questions. Would like to introduce ourselves quickly to you. So my name is Luca Borelli. I'm a director in the deals practice of PwC Switzerland. I'm part of the transaction services team. I'm with PwC since more than 13 years, and I started my career in audit. And after doing the Swiss CPA, I moved to the transaction service practices in 2012. I then spent 3 years in Switzerland before I moved to London for a 2-year secondment in our transaction service practices in London, where I started to focus on pharma and life science. And since 2017, I'm back in Switzerland and now been focusing on pharma and life science since. So quite a long career in PwC and quite extensive experience in deals, done over 100 transactions so far. And I'm focusing now, as said, on pharma and life science and also international private equity transactions. With me today is my colleague Felix, who will introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Also from my side, warm welcome to our career webcast about transaction services. Thank you, Luca. My name is Felix Peters. I'm a senior associate with PwC in Luca's team in transaction services. I've been with PwC for a bit more than 2 years. As part of the EDGE program, I started and joined the company, and I've now been working in transaction services for 1.5 years and have had significant buy and sell side exposure during that time already. But I've also worked on engagement in corporate finance, MDay, and valuations. Before that, I gained some experience as an intern and working student in the M&A space, private equity research, and the insurance industry. I also hold a master's in business management. So I think we should get right to it, and Luca will give you a quick overview on PwC and what we do in transaction services. Luca?
Thank you, Felix. As said, I will give a quick intro into what is PwC Switzerland, then also our deals practice, and then specifically we talk about transaction services, which is the department which we're currently working for and which today we're going to introduce to you. But first of all, PwC Switzerland. So we're the most trusted professional service provider in Switzerland and also worldwide. In Switzerland, we have 184 partners, and we do revenue of roughly 900 million. We do that with our over 3,000 employees, of which we have circa 40% female and 60% male. We work out of 15 office locations, and we house 85 nationalities. So you see, we have quite a diverse workforce, and the average age is 35 years. Maybe you've been asking yourself, I'm 37, so you see I'm already a dinosaur in PwC. We have quite a young and dynamic workforce, and we're investing a lot in upskilling our employees to make sure we stay the #1 in the market. But today's topic is about M&A and deals. And currently we are in a very, very hot M&A environment, which you see for sure every day in the news when you can read about all the transactions that are happening. But what is M&A? I mean, M&A usually is when a seller and the bidder come together and they agree on the sale of a company. And who is involved besides the seller and the bidder? You usually have a lead advisor, that's most commonly known as investment banking. You also have bankers, which care about financing and finance the transactions. You have the lawyers, you have the tax advisors, and you have due diligence advisors. You usually have all of these in a deal. And PwC does all of these services except for the financing, which is obviously done by the banks. But we have lead advisory from our corporate finance. We have lawyers and tax advisors in our tax and legal practices. And we do due diligence, obviously, in our deals practice. When we talk about due diligence, it's financial, commercial, operational, etc. When we talk about our deals practice in advisory, we talk about what we call the core deals platform. The core deals platform is made up of 4 departments. The first, as I just said, is the corporate finance department. Corporate finance is helping our clients to set up acquisitions, to find targets, but also to sell companies, to help in mergers, to help with management buyouts, succession planning, carve-outs, etc. This is what we usually call the investment banking services. Then we have a next department, which is our valuation department. Our valuation department helps our clients with the financial reporting, the valuation, obviously, of targets, but also in terms of tax valuations, goodwill impairment testing, valuation consulting, and also financial modeling to build complex financial models for our clients in transaction environment, but also otherwise. Then we have the transaction services department. That's where Felix and I are working in, where we do buy and sell side due diligence for our client. We also help them with share and purchase agreements, but we usually help them with due diligence with a strong focus on financial due diligence, but also with commercial due diligence, operational, IT due diligence, etc. And the last department in our core deals platform is what we call delivering deal value. They help our client to deliver the deal value during a deal or post-deal. What they do is integration management, integration planning for our clients, but also in carve-out situation where only a part of a company is disposed to help a customer with the carve-out, to evaluate the carve-outs, and to ensure that the deal can be done in this situation and is value-adding for our clients. That's what we call our core deals platform, and based on that, we work together with our tax colleagues and with our legal colleagues, and also sometimes with our assurance colleagues to provide our clients the best advice in M&A situation. As discussed, today's webcast is around transaction services and the topic of due diligence. And Felix will now give you a bit of an insight in what due diligence actually means.
Yes, thank you, Luca. So after you have now seen the broad picture of what we do in PwC deals and what we do in TS, you were given a rough overview. I can imagine you really want to know more about generally the purpose of our work and how it is on a day-to-day basis. So to introduce you to our work, I want to give you a quick example. Imagine a situation in which you're offered this house by an agent, and he gives you this picture and asks you how much you would want to bid. And before you put in your bid of how much you want to potentially pay for it, you meet your friend, and you take the car and you drive up to the house and want to really see it, not just from the picture, but in reality. And then you pull up at the house and then you see this. Obviously, that is something that looks quite fascinating, but instantly changes your perception and eventually likely also your opinion of the asset. And this is exactly the core of our transaction services work. When we look into transactions and companies in detail and really try to understand the core of the business and change or solidify the opinion and perception of our clients when they buy and sell companies. So more precisely, what is transaction services work about? Broadly, you can classify the three purposes of transaction services into three groups. The first is fact-finding, the second is analysis and preparation, and the third is the results part, which is the input for other analyses further down the line in M&A. First of all, fact-finding. This describes the process of collecting and structuring, transforming data that we receive from our client or from the other side when we work on a buy-side company, buy-side divestiture or sale, and to really make the data usable, which then goes into the second step, which is the analysis and preparation part, where we really in-depth review the financial statements and other information that we are given, and where we try to understand value drivers and potential deal breakers and communicate them to our clients. Also, part of our work, and this is really important on a day-to-day basis, is that we ask management of the company that is up for sale very detailed questions, and we get them to answer these questions. We literally have calls with them every day and get the CFO or the respective staff who is responsible for the numbers and for the information to give us further information and to answer questions that we may have. And last but not least, we quite often in every project are very good at visualizing information in a way that it makes the data interesting to the reader and us able to conclude and draw conclusions from it in a very good way. And last but not least, the third purpose is the results purpose, where we provide input with our analysis for other stakeholders in the M&A process. For instance, bankers or lawyers who have to set this, set the share purchase agreement into stone, or have to come up with financing. So our reports quite often end up in banks or law firms and serve as a basis of general valuations of the business further down the line in the process. So this was the first very basic introduction to TS. In the next step, Luke and I will give you a short introduction to more practical examples of TS projects. We want to encourage you to ask your questions in the chat, as we, in the end, as Luca said, have a Q&A session. So whatever thoughts are popping through your head, feel free to ask them in the chat. Well, let's get going on those TS projects that we want to introduce you to. We have two examples. We have a buy-side project where we were mandated by a buyer, and a sell-side project which will be introduced to you by Luca in the second step. So project number one is a project we refer to as Project Jack. Usually projects in our business are code names, so until it's signed and closed and made public, we never ever talk about the client names, because quite often it's absolutely confidential. But in this case, we can talk about a deal that has gone through the media a lot and has caught media's attention. It was the sale of Jumbo, the DIY chain that we all know, by Maus Frères, a French conglomerate with several brands and businesses, to the Swiss co-op Genossenschaft. And it entailed the acquisition of 40 DIY chains across Switzerland. We were a very, very good and hard-working team on this one. It was Luca and myself, as well as the senior manager, senior associate at the time, and Frank, the partner. And as some of you might have heard, it was one of the big deals that really also went through the media back in April 2021 when it was eventually closed. And a key challenge here was the COVID impact on the business, which was really not as straightforward. As you can see in the charts here, we were mandated by Co-op to find deal breakers to understand the target business and the value drivers. And we ended up analyzing every product group in the store and every DIY store on a store-by-store basis to determine the profitability of these stores and to also understand what effect COVID had on their inventories, because as we know, inventory is part of net working capital, and net working capital is very important when it comes to determining the purchase price in the end. So it's one of my first deals in TS, and I have to say it was a very exciting and tough deal in terms of timing, and therefore I can say that I learned a lot, and hope that future deals will be just as important to our clients. And with this, I want to hand over to Luca, who will introduce you to Project Apex.
Thank you, Felix. Yes, Project Apex, as opposed to Jack that Felix just presented, was what we call a sell-side project. So here we didn't work for the buyer, but we worked for the seller. And the seller were two large international private equity companies, Nordic Capital and Avista Capital Partners, who sold Asino International, which is a pharma business, focusing on distributing generic drugs in emerging markets, to ADQ, which is one of the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi. We have been working for Asino over a number of years and also supported them, and Nordic and Avista, in their journey to grow the business. And when it was time to exit the business for the two private equities, we helped them with setting up a so-called vendor due diligence. In a vendor due diligence, you do a due diligence as you would for any buyer, but you do it for the vendor, and at the end of the process, you will sign your liability over to the ultimate purchaser. This is a concept that is done to speed up the deals process, because you have several parties in an auction which all want to do due diligence. And if everyone is doing their own due diligence on the buy side, then it gets very time consuming and also a lot of work for the management team. And hence they commissioned us to prepare a vendor due diligence report, which was then distributed to the interested parties. And so the process could be shortened. Here, Felix told about the specific topic around sales seasonality in do-it-yourself chain due to Corona. Asino is a pharma business. Here, one of the biggest focus was around their product portfolio. In pharma is mainly what is the growth driver? How did growth develop? And so we spent a lot of time analyzing on each individual product basis. What was the growth? Was it volume driven? Was it price driven? Was growth driven by launching new products? What was the impact of these continuing products? What is the impact of margin when the product mix shifts, etc. So very detailed analysis of the business drivers and the growth and revenue drivers of the company. Slightly different than what Felix presented before, but also a very exciting and a very successful project in the end. So these were two real life examples, hopefully captured your attention, because Felix will now lead through a general how a general TS project works, and then also kind of how a day in our business looks like.
Exactly. I can imagine that you out there are currently sitting there imagining possibly what a normal day and a normal project of a TS consultant, or in the case of Luca, a TS director might look like. And we have prepared something to show you generally how our transaction services projects work. Obviously, that's just a part of the big deals process that can take up to 9 months or even a year. But a TS project in particular usually takes around 4 to 8 weeks. We're now talking about a buy-side project. On the sell side, we're talking about 3 to 4 months because we have more time, we dig deeper. But for this specific example, we're talking about a buy-side. So 5 weeks in this example. And usually the first few days up to the first week, we're really collecting a lot of data. We are reading what the sell side advisors have put together. We're reading the information memorandum, and especially junior staff are structuring data a lot and start making tables so we can start our analysis in a very structured and clean way. And we can also communicate the first results as a data pack to our client, who obviously wants to know immediately what we think about the company and is excited to hear about our first findings, because this is why he's paying us and this is why he has mandated us for our work. And then as we progress and as we do the analyses that we're doing, obviously questions pop up. For instance, we've seen in the DIY chain that the seasonality was absolutely crazy. And we expected that with COVID, but obviously we wanted to dig deeper. We wanted to understand which stores were most affected, and maybe for instance, how was the online platform keeping up with the sales and stuff. So we listed all our questions, we communicated them to management once the list was complete, and in the next step, you usually have a Q&A call with management where they then give you the answers, and even junior staff, but everyone on the project usually is involved with asking questions and taking notes while management extensively answers those questions. And this is really important because this is what we then have to write up in our reports and communicate to our clients. And usually after these Q&A calls, we then start a storyboarding session, and we really, in our team, make up our minds about the company. What are the deal breakers really? Why would our client maybe pull out of the deal and would probably not buy the company? Why is it not a good fit? But also, obviously, on the positive side, what are the value drivers? What's the upside, synergies, dyssynergies? And overall, what is our verdict? Would we go ahead? What are we advising them on? And what are our conclusions? And then at the end, we write up our report, and we get feedback from the partner, and eventually send the final report to our client, who will then discuss this in their board sessions and meetings, and eventually come to a conclusion, which usually we are no longer involved in. But obviously something very, very positive that we're usually involved in when a deal goes ahead is the signing and closing celebrations, which are usually celebrated with a nice dinner and a couple of drinks in a nice restaurant somewhere. And that is a very nice event where everyone comes together to celebrate the success that has been collectively achieved. So that was a broad overview of the project and a classical day or a typical day on the on a project for a consultant looks like this. If you have ever asked yourself, when are we getting up in the morning? When we go to bed? Usually we check in at 8:30 in the morning. We check in with our team and we discuss things. And we have client meetings in the morning. 12 o'clock is then usually lunch break. It is usually 12 o'clock sharp, actually, if you've asked yourself how much that is set in stone. And in the afternoon, we have then other things that we do. For instance, we update our partner on the latest analysis or the client call that we've just had in the morning. And we pick up points that he has that he wants to have us dig into. And in the afternoon, we then usually work further on our analysis. We add data to our data models and we discuss findings before then going ahead and maybe communicate them to our client or the partner. And you shouldn't forget about very nice coffee breaks that we usually have, where you get coaching from people within your team, but also in the broader TS context, the bigger team. And then usually, if everything goes well, around 7 to 8 o'clock, no later than that, we wrap up and we leave the office, and sometimes we go for a nice beer together. So usually, this is roughly what a day looks like. And with this, I want to give it back to Luca and let him introduce you to some special events that might be absolutely interesting for you guys.
Thank you, Felix. And another reminder, I mean, you can still submit questions for afterwards. I'm sure now after Felix has introduced to a typical project and a typical day, I'm sure you have some follow-ups on this. I just want to quickly say we're obviously growing our business and we need new people. You know that we have like the Edge program. We also have a lot of direct hires for students in our business, and you can check those on our website. But now, very near for all our, hopefully, a lot of female listeners today, on the 18th of November, we do the first specifically to female addressed event, which is called She's a Deal Maker. And we definitely want to welcome a lot of deal makers soon, and definitely next year in the next recruiting cycle. So if you think that MDay could be something for you, check it out. There's still spaces. Go on our web page, which is PwC.ch/careers, where you find out everything with regard to the event, and you can take part in a day where you get definitely more in-depth experience to what MDay means at PwC and what options there are for your career, and real-life experience. So definitely, if you're interested, not an event to miss. And so with that, we are at the end of our presentation, and would now start with the questions you've been submitting. And I think a question which is very good for the start was around what are the requirements to do an internship or to start at PwC. And I would phrase it this way. I mean, obviously in our MDay, and specifically in the transaction service department, most of our associates come with a business background, so business administration background. Focus on accounting is always desirable, but we don't have a set in stone rule that we wouldn't look at candidates that have been doing other studies. So we're definitely interested in good talent, and not necessarily which universities or which studies they're coming from. So depending a little bit on the job profile, we're open to all graduates, and then just focus on acquiring the best talent. But when you think about specifically TS, definitely business administration, focus on accounting might be an advantage. Then maybe a very good follow-up question is, I mean, as we discussed before, we have our Edge graduate program, which starts once a year, which is a deals program where you can make experiences in several of the departments. But we also have always direct hires, and there it is also, it's not only like kind of a one point in the year. Sometimes we also recruit during the year. For example, at the moment we have postings open for associates starting their career in our transaction service department, and we are obviously open also for international candidates. As I said before, PwC is a very diverse company, and also our department, we have several nationalities. They will always depend a little bit on the need and on the skills, but there is definitely open to everyone. And maybe Felix, you want to take over and discuss what kind of tools we use when we do due diligence.
Happy to do so. Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions around the tools. So as to in how far is data science that we're doing, I think we use, obviously Excel is still absolutely state of the art alongside PowerPoint, but we also use Alteryx for our data processing. So it's not necessarily coding in R or something like that we're doing. That would usually take too much time because projects are really tight usually, and then Alteryx is a good thing. Also, yeah, in terms of German mandatory to work, it really depends on the department. I think that is clearly something that we can say. And yeah, I personally think that, as I said before, the data sort of affinity to numbers and data is quite important for both interns and graduates. So yeah, Luca, we've had one question also about the analysis, EBITDA, net debt, net working capital. I mean, that's a very broad question, but maybe you want to say something about that.
Yes. I mean, when we look at the deal and the valuation principle, I mean, we obviously have a valuation which is based on a discounted cash flow model to arrive at an entity value, and the proxy for an entity value is always also with an EBITDA multiple, which needs to be on a normalized EBITDA. That's why a normalization of EBITDA is one of the core analyses we do, because we want to have the right starting point for business plan analysis, and we also want to have the right EBITDA for multiple to compare with the outcome of the DCF. Then when we look at the entity value, that obviously is including like any debt and how the company is financed, but deals are usually on a what we call debt and cash-free basis. So what needs to be done is a so-called EV to equity bridge, and there we support our clients with defining what is debt, what further adjustment need to be done as debt-like, and also what level of working capital is normal for the business and also needs to be included as part of the EV to equity value bridge. And these are 3 or 4 core analyses we do in transaction services, and then do a lot further analyses, kind of more commercial to understand the business, to be able to understand the business plan, etc. I think there were some other questions around how often we do internships, starting dates. I mean, here we would refer to our careers webpage. Obviously, the main recruiting cycle is for a start around September, October, in line with how most people like finish their studies. But there are, as I said, always opportunities for internships or direct entries. And if there are none, I mean, don't hesitate just to send your application and your desire, and then we will definitely look at, because as I said, we're growing and the base of our work are our people, and therefore we are always open for good candidates. Then we had a very interesting question around our kind of remuneration from our clients. So we usually, our jobs are on a more time and material basis, so we charge hourly or daily rates to our client. It depends though a little bit in what department. That's true for transaction services. In our corporate finance MDay services, there is also success fees, which are possible, and these fee models are constantly evolving. We also had already had jobs where we had discounts or bonuses depending on how satisfied the client was, etc. So this is a topic which is very interesting and evolving. Currently, it's mainly time and material based, and therefore we obviously need to do a lot of hours. And there was also the questions around what are kind of the typical hours. And it's quite difficult to answer that, because M&A is obviously a business where the demand is quite high and there is a lot of time pressure. And therefore, it can be that we have weeks where we have quite a lot of hours, 60, maybe even 70. But at PwC, I think that is a reason why I really like it, and I'm still here after more than 30 years. I think we have a very good culture of working result-oriented, and I think that means we work a lot if it's absolutely necessary. But if it's not necessary, if we have a downtime or if a project is delayed, then we don't have to be in the office and then work. So over a year, it balances out quite nicely. And I would say on average, it's probably a 45 to 50 hours week, but there are obviously very big ups and downs, so that it can be sometimes more and sometimes less. But on average, I would say our people have a 50-hour week over a year. Then I think there was also a good question on what means, like in terms of buy side and sell side, and I think we touched on it a little bit before. I think the buy side deals are easy to understand. So we are mandated by a client who is interested in acquiring a target, and we look at the target for our client. The sell side is, as explained, we are already working for the seller, but we do that independently and give an independent view on the target, which then can be provided to interested parties. And that is a product which is very common in auction processes, just to ensure that multiple bidders can do due diligence at the same time without tying up the management of the target too extensively, because that they all usually are already quite busy in a transaction because they need to do the transaction plus their daily business. So it's mainly a product to help to increase the speed of processes.
Yeah, then we also have questions. There was one interesting question about what motivates us, I think, and why we chose to be involved in M&A. And I think Luca has a different background to me. I've just come out of uni and started in deals at PwC, and I personally have a strong drive towards working with numbers and visualizing them, and also working a bit with data and all that in the strategic context of growing businesses and really having an impact. I mean, Co-op, we saw the deal earlier, is something that remains, and it's in the news, and we all see the transformation. So that is really something that all in all makes M&A to me very interesting. And TS is a very, very nice team, I have to say, at PwC. I always felt very welcome. And so, yeah, that was one of the key, or all of the key aspects, basically.
Yeah, and maybe a few more questions. I think very interesting why we choose to work in deals and then what motivates us. As Felix pointed out, we have maybe a little bit different backgrounds, but I joined PwC in audit. And first and foremost, I joined PwC because I like the culture, I like the people that work here. And I really enjoyed working in audit and doing the Swiss CPA. But then I also kind of saw that maybe I need something a little bit more exciting than audit, which was a very structured process, highly visible. And I started to see what other opportunities there are. And then I moved into transaction services because, as said, our projects are relatively short. So you have a very high variance in different projects. It's always something new, even though some steps are obviously always the same, but it's always new clients, new projects, different teams. And that's something that excited me and honestly still excites me, and that's why I'm still here. So I found my passion in doing deals and still love working on it with the client every day. Then there is a very interesting question on the future of TS, and obviously we are looking into improving our processes. And since I started, I think we already came a very long way. And when I talked to a few more senior guys in our department on how it was like 10 years before I started, that was still completely different. So there is a constant evolving of how we're delivering our services. And I think currently there is a big move in digitization. As Felix pointed out before, we use Power BI, we use Alteryx, we have other models which we can use in terms of doing analysis, but also reporting. We also work with Tableau. We have a specific D&A team in our deals team, which can also do a bit more complex analyses. And then also what is important is kind of what I pointed out before, is the focus on delivering deal value. It's not anymore just one product, but it's like combining all the products, combining forces and the knowledge that PwC and our professionals have to deliver great services to client out of one hand. And this will continue. So there will be more automation, there will be involvement of our service, and I'm sure we will be will continue to be at the forefront of this. Then there was one more question with regard to equity value. Maybe I wasn't clear. So you always, the deal is always priced on an equity value, but to arrive at the equity value, you obviously need to kind of bridge it from the entity value through adjusting for debt-like items and net working capital. And then maybe lastly, because someone picked up on me telling you that I'm responsible now for pharma and life science. So in PwC and also in deals, we have two main distinctions in terms of specialization. There are teams who are doing financial services and insurance and similar businesses, and another team which is doing everything else. So Felix and I are obviously in the everything else team, and that is the biggest specialization we have. And afterwards, we have the individual products, which we discussed before, so the corporate finance team, the transaction service team, the delivering deal value team, and also valuation team, and we have a real estate team. And these teams work together on projects. And industries, when you start, are not marked. So we don't have a specific pharma life science team for junior, which is always together. But the more senior you are, the more you start to focus on a specific service, a specific product, and then also you start to focus on an industry and can build a career in a specific industry. But when we recruit people, we want to give them the option to be broad in the beginning, to do as much as possible, because experience is everything in the beginning. And then the further you progress your career, the more you can specialize on something specific. I hope this was useful for you. I thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you learned something. I hope Deals is interesting for you. And despite me not knowing you, I hope to see some of you guys soon, either in a recruiting event or in our team. I wish you all the best with your continuing studies and have a good afternoon. Thank you.